Chapter 1: Individual Unfoldment of Consciousness. The primary mission of the Infinite Way is inner unfoldment, the revelation of truth from within our own being. The written word is the least important part of this work. That which is not written or spoken is the greater teaching. Human teachers are but temporary helps on the way. Only from within comes the illumination which makes it possible for some to heal and to be able to teach that the kingdom of God is within you and that you are the fulfillment of God. The real teacher receives inspiration and illumination and is able to impart these only because he has the realization that I can of my own self do nothing. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. Therefore, this Father within comes as an impersonal presence to awaken the receptive thought to the divinity of the individual. And they shall all be taught of God. My conscious oneness with God makes me one with all those who are able to receive the word at this level of consciousness. Your conscious oneness with God makes you receptive and responsive to all truth. Wherever there is a receptive thought, God speaks. Wherever spiritual being is manifested, God is present. Since God manifests and expresses its own being as you are as infinite as God, not just a little portion of God. God does not divide itself, but manifests, expresses, reveals, unfolds, and discloses itself as you and as me. It is a state of Christ consciousness in which God speaks, God moves, God acts. When I speak or write about the letter of truth, that is the least part of the activity which is going on in my consciousness. Always, as a teacher of truth, my consciousness is alert and awake and transcends anything concerning the letter of truth which I might impart. That consciousness, which is the divinity of my being, is also the divinity of your being. It is the divine consciousness of you and is arousing you to an awareness of its own divine qualities, nature, and character. Subchapter: Following the Spiritual Path. Those of you who at some degree have been able to receive the light and who have received a measure of unfoldment and inner revelation will recognize that because of that experience, you will never again be quite the same. From that moment on, it is as if you had touched an infinite center of wisdom and knowledge, an infinite presence which guides, guards, directs, protects, maintains, and sustains. Those of you who are on this path and who have not yet had this experience, however, will have it. Because, has it not been written? Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. God has brought you to this place of unfoldment and will not suffer you to stray from the path until you have received your illumination. Following the spiritual path, however, calls for perseverance, because this is not an easy way. This is not an easy path. Straight is the gate, and narrow is the way, which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. There are trials on this path, many trials. It is not a path of roses without thorns. You may wonder why, after God has made himself evident in your experience, you ever have an ache or a pain, a trouble or a woe. But I can testify that some of our greatest trials come after we have embarked upon this path, and that it is these very trials which force us out of our physical sense of existence into the spiritual consciousness of life and form. The spiritual path is a path of service. We are not only servants of the Lord, but we are servants to others on this path. In this work, we will not find the world waiting to serve us, but we shall find rather that we are the servants. The Master taught this lesson of service and humility when he washed the feet of his disciples. While we in this age are not called upon to perform our servanthood in that manner, we do serve in many other ways. Those who know men and women who have received illumination recognize that their life is one of devotion, not only to God, but to those who come to them for help, to those seeking healing or enlightenment. Subchapter: The Infinite Way and Other Teachings. Each one of us has sought an understanding of God through some particular form of study. Whatever the religious organization or teaching was, it acted as a stepping stone for us to go higher in the understanding of the teaching of the Master. Even though sometimes differences between the infinite way and other approaches to truth are pointed out, it must always be remembered that this is done without any sense of criticism or judgment. There can be no judgment of any of these, only love and honor for all of them. The same is true of materia medica. Doctors and nurses are devoting their lives to helping humanity as they see it, and on the physical plane they are making progress. So we have only love and respect for them. One of the great differences between this message and that of certain metaphysical teachings is that in the infinite way, there is not some divine mind or divine love or divine something or other that is going to do anything for you. The infinite way teaches that God, the divine consciousness of your being, is the law unto your being. It is the only law, and it is the law of love. Another difference between this message and others is that we do not attribute any power to this thing which some people call mortal mind. Many times you have heard the expression, "I wonder what mortal mind is going to do to me today," and it usually does. At one time, it was taught and generally believed that there were mental causes for physical diseases. And about this same time, there were lists in circulation indicating that if you had rheumatism, it was caused by resentment. If you had cancer, it was caused by hate or jealousy. And if you had something else, it was caused by some other mental or emotional characteristic. Such teachings, however, we do not accept as true. In human belief, no doubt some of this is true. Today, even medical science claims that if you worry enough, you may develop an ulcer, and this is probably true on the purely human plane. However, this has nothing to do with the teaching of the infinite way, in which teaching disease not only has no cause, but actually there is no law of disease. There is nothing whatsoever that is doing anything to us. No, it is some universal belief which at the moment, through ignorance, we are accepting. Through ignorance, we accept the universal belief in a selfhood apart from God. What we have to do is not to examine our own thought to see what wrong thinking we have been doing, but rather see to what extent we are accepting universal beliefs and realize that all universal beliefs are mesmeric suggestions and that our mind, the one and only mind there is, cannot be used as an instrument to mesmerize or to be mesmerized. Thus, we withdraw power from that false sense and gain the consciousness of one power and one presence. There is but one I, or ego, one consciousness, whether it is appearing as you or as me, and this is another vital point on which we differ from some of the current teachings. The infinite way teaches that you are not effect, idea, manifestation, or reflection. You are consciousness appearing. I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is only one I. Whether that I appears as you or as me, it is the same I. Subchapter: The Infinite Way, a Way of Life. This message is called the Infinite Way. It is a name which means nothing to anyone in the world except to those who are familiar with this teaching, those who know that the Infinite Way is really a way of life which leads to the unfoldment of their own consciousness. This is what the Infinite Way is: a way of life which acknowledges God to be infinite consciousness. And the work of the aspirants on this way is to bring themselves into conformity with it. In order to demonstrate the harmonies of life, we have to gain the consciousness of good. In this teaching, we believe that effect does not constitute supply, and that a physically healthy body does not constitute health. The spiritual way is to gain the consciousness of life and let it produce the supply and the health. This way is not a method of demonstrating either supply or health, but is a way of demonstrate the consciousness of the presence of God, and let that consciousness bring forth the supply and the health. Step by step, our way is unfolded before us. We cannot always see the complete design, but as we take each successive step forward, the completed picture is inevitably brought forth. Subchapter: The Leavening Influence of Truth. Every metaphysical teaching has one great object: the attainment, in some measure, of the consciousness of God. Up to that point, the Infinite Way agrees with all metaphysical teaching. It differs, however, from the traditional theological belief which teaches that heaven is a place attainable only after death. All metaphysical teachings acknowledge the possibility of attaining heaven here and now. In all of them, whether or not their methods agree with our methods, an attempt is made to heal spiritually and to bring the activity of God into individual experience in our bodies, in our business, and in our home life, and into world affairs. In a brief period of time, the writings of the Infinite Way have been widely distributed and circulated throughout the world. When read with an open mind, they are being found acceptable not only to independent metaphysicians and those in organized metaphysical movements, but to members of orthodox churches. In these writings, all those of spiritual intent are finding a common meeting ground. The truth of the message is leavening thought to the extent that bigotry, hatred, and fear of one another's religious beliefs are being broken down and dissolved. In the realization of God as consciousness, the consciousness of individual being, there cannot remain religious or racial prejudices, hatreds, fears, or bigotries. These only remain while there is a belief of a selfhood apart from God. Whatever of truth is found in this message is really truth voicing itself, and ultimately its leavening influence will bring all together in the realization of the oneness of consciousness. By this, I do not mean together in the sense of organization, but together in the opening of our own consciousness to the oneness of the teaching of truth, together in the sense meant by Jesus when he said to his disciples, "He that is not against us is on our part." The metaphysicians of the world are trying to unify the world through the understanding of God as omnipresence. The teachings of all of them stand upon the postulate that God is individual mind, God is individual life, God is individual soul. Therefore, there should be no sense of division among them. There should be no feeling that one has more truth than another or that one is better than another. As long as there is a feeling of superiority or comparison, consciousness is not open to the oneness and universality of truth. You will never find God in a book. If you want to find God, if you want to know God, you yourself must turn within and find him in the secret place. You can never see God, but you can become aware of God within your own being. You can realize and feel his presence. When your thought is on the external, the things you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, you are missing the spiritual path, the infinite way, because you cannot see, hear, taste, touch, or smell the reality of being, God's creation. The purpose of this writing and of all your study is not just to gain knowledge about truth. The letter pertaining to truth of being is so simple that children can easily understand it. You will find that 3/4 of all you read about the truth is forgotten when once that sense of God as omnipresence becomes apparent. The purpose of your study is so to lift consciousness that this sense of omnipresence is attained. When that is attained, healing work is done with a smile, not with strenuous thought-taking. Supply, wholeness, completeness, everything comes with just a smile. It is a peculiar little smile, but it is God, and it knows the nothingness of that which appears as a human being. And yet, it is all there is to individual identity. Make it your particular work to realize that the power, the quality, the quantity, and the reality are not in that which is formed, but are rather in the principle or soul or consciousness which produces all form. Subchapter: A New Bottle. And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, but new wine must be put into new bottles. We have to develop a whole new bottle, a new state of consciousness, and we begin by giving up all material sense. This cannot be done in a moment. It is the work of a lifetime because it involves a complete change of consciousness. Do not try to put new wine into old bottles. Do not try to plant the seeds of this inspiration in thorny or rocky ground. If you do, they will be lost. The soil must be prepared. A spiritual consciousness must be developed. It takes much patience, and you must be willing to sit alone with yourself and ponder this idea of individual consciousness as the cause, law, and power of being. Can you see that the allness of God is appearing as you, and that the allness of God is appearing as your neighbor? In proportion as you accept this truth, you are developing the Christ of your own consciousness. You are developing your awareness of the fullness of the Christ as your being. The development of the Christ leads to the awareness of the presence, the consciousness of inner guidance, the awareness of an inner infinite being that which goes before you at all times, that which is conscious while you sleep. Then you realize how much greater than any human circumstance or condition is this awareness of the infinite nature of your own consciousness, which has always been at the center of your being, only awaiting recognition. For this work, every word uttered by the Master should be learned and accepted as law. One passage alone could change your experience, but a whole new consciousness can be gained by taking every passage given by the Master Christian and conscientiously utilizing it. more than any other prophet or seer, he has given the secret of spiritual living to the Western world. As an example, read the Master teaching on the futility of anxious thought-taking. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, neither for the body, what ye shall put on. This life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the raven, for they neither sow nor reap, which neither have storehouse nor barn, and God feedeth them. How much more are ye better than the fowls? And which of you, with taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? If ye then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you, that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothe the grass, which is today in the field, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind. For all these things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But rather seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Luke 12:22-32. Gain the consciousness that your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things, so that every time you are tempted to take thought about next year's work, house, or food, you will be reminded that it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Ask yourself, am I living in this consciousness of taking no thought? Remind yourself of the Master's question. Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? For my thoughts are not your thoughts. God's thoughts are not your thoughts, so why take thought at all? Let us rather look out at this universe and understand that the divine power that formed it maintains and sustains it. But do we do this? No. We set up a separate entity, a selfhood apart from God, which has to be cared for and catered to, and we devote a lifetime to earning a living for it. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. My peace I give unto you." At no point was Jesus seeking his own demonstration. He was always living in the sense of giving, of being a transparency for good to the world. The Christ cannot enter the consciousness that is seeking for itself. God cannot be used for the purpose of increasing humanhood. Our mission in the world is to be a transparency for good. The I that is seeking something for itself is not the Son of God, because the Son is an heir of God and joint heir with Christ, and the Son is ever aware that all that the Father hath is his. What then is there for the Son to seek? Subchapter: Infinity pours through us. In building this new consciousness, we cannot seek anything, but we must begin to realize that we are heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ, and therefore we are that place through which all of God is pouring. With this developed Christ consciousness, we too can feed 5,000, or as many as come, feed them spiritually, and if necessary, feed them materially, since the same Spirit pouring through appears as food. It is only a question of how much we limit God. Certainly, humanly, we cannot do the works, but God can. when it is rightly understood that we are the Christ, the very presence of God, not living from the standpoint of receiving anything, but from the standpoint of letting infinity pour through us, we shall find that we can feed the 5,000. The Heavenly Father is our own consciousness, and He knoweth what things we have need of. End of chapter 1. Additional free content about the principles and application of the Infinite Way and general mystical practice is available for your use on the Practical Mysticism YouTube channel and at my website at the link in the notes. Please subscribe and share so together we can assist in the great awakening to truth. Thank you.